Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank our witnesses for joining us this morning. We're here to discuss the fallout after the collapse of FTX, and some Americans very likely suffered significant losses from the bankruptcy of FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried's misconduct. On Monday, we saw the arrest of Mr. Bankman-Fried, and this came as a surprise to no one, with the possible exception of Mr. Bankman-Fried. We owe it to each customer to get to the bottom of the FTX implosion, and any violations of the law should be aggressively prosecuted. The Department of Justice and other enforcement agencies should expeditiously investigate the unseemly relationship between a company that was effectively a hedge fund and an exchange entrusted with customer funds. While all the facts have not yet come to light, we've clearly witnessed wrongdoing that is almost certainly illegal. There was unauthorized lending of customer assets to an affiliated entity, and there were apparently fraudulent promises to investors and customers about FTX's operations. These are outrageous and completely unacceptable.
Yeah, they're like
The SEC also believes that FTX committed fraud against equity investors. They're going to pursue that, as they should. But I want to underscore a bigger issue here, and that is that the wrongful behavior that occurred here is not specific to the underlying asset. What appears to have happened here is a complete breakdown in the handling of those assets. In our discussion of FTX today, I hope we're able to separate the likely illegal actions from perfectly lawful and innovative cryptocurrencies. Now, it's important to define this space. Cryptocurrencies are analogized to tokens, but they're actually software. The software protocols that are foundational to the crypto ecosystem are like operating systems, and then applications are run on top of these operating systems. Currently, there are many competing operating systems and many apps running on them. There's nothing intrinsically good or evil about software. It's about what people do with it. And with this analogy in mind, what we should all understand here is one simple thing. The code committed no crime. FTX and cryptocurrencies are not the same thing. FTX was opaque, centralized, and dishonest. Cryptocurrencies usually are open source, decentralized, and transparent. To those who think this episode justifies banning crypto, and I've actually heard that suggested, I'd ask you to think about several other historical parallels. The 2008 financial crisis involved obvious misuse of products related to mortgages. Did we decide to ban mortgages? Of course not. A commodity brokerage firm run by former New Jersey Senator John Corzine collapsed after customer funds, including U.S. dollars, were misappropriated to fill a shortfall from the firm's trading losses. Nobody suggested that the problem was the U.S. dollar or that we should ban it. With FTX, the problem is not the instruments that were used. The problem was the misuse of customer funds, gross mismanagement, and likely illegal behavior. So let's talk about what comes next. Some of my colleagues have suggested somehow pausing cryptocurrency before we pass legislation. This is a profoundly misguided, not to mention impossible idea. Short of enacting draconian authoritarian policies, cryptocurrency cannot be stopped. If we tried, the technology would simply migrate offshore. Cryptocurrency does not need brick and mortar facilities to operate. And typing computer code should clearly be seen as a form of protected speech. Are we going to decide to pause the Constitution in order to stop crypto? This is exactly the kind of mindset that has driven this activity to the darker and less regulated parts of the world. Now, if Congress had passed legislation to create a well-defined regulatory regime with sensible guardrails, we'd have multiple U.S. exchanges competing here under the full force of those laws and regulations. In that scenario, it's not clear that FTX would have ever existed, at least on the scale that it did, not if we had American companies that were an alternative and properly regulated. The complete indifference to an appropriate regulatory regime by both Congress and the SEC probably contributed to the rise of operations like FTX. Others have suggested that we refrain from addressing cryptocurrency at all because we wouldn't want to legitimize its use. Well, I think that is both misguided and irresponsible. Congress can and should offer a sensible approach for the domestic regulation of these activities. I think we should start with stablecoins. This is an activity that my colleagues, we can analogize to existing traditional financial products. There's clear bipartisan agreement that stablecoins need consumer protections. There are virtually none in place now. I've proposed a framework that would do that. Senator Lummis and Gillibrand have also proposed a framework. Congress also needs to determine the criteria and the disclosures by which issuance of digital assets will be regulated. And we should acknowledge the possibility that there's certain token issuance, like Bitcoin, that don't need that kind of regulation. We should also clearly delineate regulations for the secondary market trading of these assets, including at exchanges like FTX US. Some of my colleagues have begun this important work. We can provide sensible consumer protections for which there would be very broad agreement while still allowing for the development of applications that are going to run on operating systems that we can't even imagine today, just as I don't think any of us ever imagined applications like Uber operating on iOS today. So let me conclude with this. It's absolutely essential to investigate any fraud and violations of existing law and prosecute those who are committing those crimes. Congress owes it to the American people to do so. This is fundamentally not about the kind of assets that were held by FTX. It's about what individuals did with those assets. Individuals can be tremendously empowered by the use and access to cryptocurrencies. Cryptocurrencies can protect against inflation when governments irresponsibly manage their own currencies. They can provide useful services without the need for a company or a middleman. And they can let individuals preserve the freedom to transact privately. Mr. Bankman-Fried may well have committed multiple crimes. The SEC and DOJ will determine that. But let's remember to distinguish between human failure and the instrument with which the failure occurred. In this case, the instrument is software, and the code committed no crime. And while Sam Bankman-Fried very well may have, it's important we not convict the code of anything but preserving and protecting individual autonomy.